afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniella Coutinho, and I work with SPI, which is a Portuguese consultancy company. We are partners in the project called ENRICH in the USA, which is the project hosting the webinar today. Here with me is my colleague Mark Spinoglu, that is also with SPI, but he's based in the US. Hi, Mark.
Hello, Daniela.
Yeah, hello. So today our webinar will be focused on big data. And first of all, I would like to thank you all for attending the webinar, and we truly hope it's helpful for you, and we truly believe that you'll like it. So I will now present you the agenda of the webinar. The opening will be done by Mark Spinoglu, my colleague that I already introduced to you, who will briefly present you the ENRICH in the USA Center. And afterwards, we will have the big data presentation from Florence D. Hudson, which is from the Northeast Big Data Innovation Hub. Flora is also the founder and CEO of FD Hint and special advisor from Trusted CI, the NSF Cybersecurity Center of Excellence at Indiana University. Thank you very much, Florence, for being here with us today. On the other hand, we will have the presentation from Big Data in the South region of the USA from Renata Rawlings-Goss, which is the Executive Director at South Big Data Innovation Hub and the Director of Industry Engagement of Georgia Institute of Technology, Institute for Data Engineering and Science. Hello, Renata, how are you? I see that you're already here with us. I'm not sure if you can listen. And finally, we will have the big data, the presentation on big data in the West region of the USA, which will be done by Meredith Lee, who is the Executive Director of East Big Data Innovation Hub. Dr. Lee is also active in the new UC Berkeley Division of Data Science and the Real-Time Intelligence Secure Explainable Lab. So at the end of the webinar, we will have time for questions and answers. So feel free to write your questions in the question section of the platform. And in the end of the webinar, the three speakers will reply to your questions. So I will now leave the floor for my colleague Mark that will provide a little overview about ENRICH in the USA.
Great, thank you, Daniela. Let me see if I can change the slide. Yeah, I don't think I'm having control at the moment.
I will change it myself.
Thank you. Okay, as Daniela mentioned, my name is Mark Spano Leo. I'm based in the US, in Los Angeles, actually, and I'm a member of ENRICH in the USA, and part of our role is to provide services to European research, technology, and businesses on reaching out to the US market. And as you see on this slide, we're part of an initiative that is supported by the European Commission. And again, I'll be very brief here because we're more interested in hearing from our speakers today. So just a couple minutes on ENRICH. But on the initiative, there's three focused markets. One is in Brazil, China, and the other is China, and the third is the US. And so with the US market as part of our services one is this webinar. And our goal is to establish a network of European research and innovation centers throughout the US. And if you can go to the next slide, please. We'll look at this quickly. One more slide. There you go. Okay. And so our first step here, we've been established for a couple of years now. We have a center in San Francisco, another center in Boston. We're looking at actually establishing a third center, possibly in Washington, DC. And our members there, as you see there at the bottom, in San Francisco, we have the AEC is managing our center there. We have NBIA, which you may know as a large network throughout US as well of incubators, is based in Florida. And so they're managing our center in Boston. And in addition to the 2 centers, we have associated hubs, which are located, 5 of them at the moment, which are located in Georgia, Missouri, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. And so we're establishing a network in the US in specific regions to assist European organizations that may be interested in entering the US market. And so we're able to cover both coasts. We have our centers in very well-known innovation hotspots in the US. And then we have hubs and other hotspots in specific regions of the US. And so if you can go to the next slide, please. And so this is just a slide on the potential actors that we support services for, and primarily we're focused on supporting Europeans in entering the US, but of course we can assist Americans that are interested in the European market as well. Next slide, please. I think this is the last slide that it will show. It's the next one. Daniela, it's not changing.
I know, I think it's freezing, but 1 second.
Okay.
It's here because
go.
it has a lot of images.
Okay, and so as you see here, we categorize the services that ENRICH provides into 4 main service areas, which seem to not show up. Oh, there we go. And the first is information services. We have marketing and RDI studies, which are on the website. I encourage you to go to the website to see those studies and the first aid information kits. We have our guidance training and infrastructure. Webinar is part of that, where we invite experts in certain fields on specific topics to present and to educate Europeans on the activities in the US, such as this webinar. And we do training as well in Europe, throughout Europe, with our partners. Matchmaking events, so typical events there that people are used to seeing, and advice and coaching, and so it's a series of different services that we provide in those areas. So in close, I'd just like to invite everyone to our website. You definitely can see our previous webinars, our market studies, and first aid information kits, as well as training modules online for you to access to educate yourselves on the US market in specific fields. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Florence Hudson, and so that we can move on with the discussion that all of us are online to hear today. So Daniela, can you please bring up Florence's presentation, and we'll go from there. Florence, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Excellent. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Mark, and Daniela, thank you for organizing this and inviting the Big Data Innovation Hubs from the US to present to this group. We are very excited to have collaboration with the EU. We actually have been working under the Horizon 2020 project for Next Generation Internet to do some collaboration, and we're going to be in a meeting together in Washington, D.C. at the beginning of July with some of our EU colleagues on that from the Think Nexus program. So we're really interested in furthering our collaboration more. And so can we put the Northeast Hub presentation back up, Daniela? Is that okay? This one is Meredith's. Meredith, would it be easier if you went first since you have to walk later, or no?
I'm fine with the scheduled time. I have an elaborate plan to cross campus in between.
Meredith is at Berkeley, California, so not too far from your San Francisco hub, probably, Mark.
No, quite close.
Neighbors.
Yes, very much. Okay, so we'll get started now. And I should have control. This will be fun. Let's see how it works. So I am Special Advisor on Next Generation Internet for the Northeast Big Data Innovation Hub. I'm on their steering committee, and I've been working with them pretty much since the beginning. And Jeanette Wing is the principal investigator, or the PI, for the NSF grant. And René Bastón is the executive director. He would be up here with Meredith, but he couldn't make it today. And so I've known René actually for probably about 15 years. So we work very closely in a number of areas. And I'm delighted to be presenting for us. And it's coordinated, the hub, even though it covers the entire Northeast, it's coordinated by Columbia University out of New York City. So first I wanted to give a little overview of the hubs. You know, what is the goal? What is the mission? How did this all start? And so we have 4 hubs with one mission, and these big data innovation hubs basically cover the entire United States. So when we work as a team, all 4 hubs, you actually have the opportunity to work with the whole country of the United States, which is really kind of handy. So this was created in 2015. The National Science Foundation decided to fund these big data innovation hubs. And our goal, our mission is to build and strengthen partnerships across industry, academia, nonprofits, and government to address societal and scientific challenges, increase economic development, and accelerate innovation, leveraging big data and across the national big data ecosystem. And as we know, big data is sometimes big data, or sometimes it's a lot of little data that creates big data, which are some of the applications we'll talk about. So we have national reach. We have 4 big data hubs that were established. The Northeast, you can see in the top right. The South, you could see there in Georgia is where Renata is located, one of the orange, the Hub PI institution. Meredith is in the West, she's the middle bubble, and then she has co-PIs up in the state of Washington and in Southern California, and then the Midwest is the middle of the country. And we engage local or regional stakeholders, and the reason that the NSF created these regionally is so we could focus on the challenges and opportunities in our regions, because they could be different. You know, there could be, you know, fires and, you know, and water shortage issues in the West. There could be other issues in the Northeast, you know. So what they wanted us to do was really focus on what's important in our particular region. So we engage with local and regional stakeholders, cities, counties, state governments, local industry, but of course industry tends to be global. So they may be working locally, but they tend to have a much broader footprint. Nonprofits and academic institutions in our region. So I mentioned Columbia University or Harvard or MIT, you'll hear about some of those. And in big data research with a regional focus, as we said. And we really are enabling collaboration. We're not a big data hub with, like, you know, petabytes of data. That's not what we are. We're collaboration hubs to enable collaborative activities and partnerships to sustain a successful national big data innovation ecosystem. And you'll see that each of the hubs will talk about different things, and we're working together because it's one country and actually one planet, which we'll talk about as well. For now anyway, until we colonize Mars. So the Northeast Regional Big Data Innovation Hub is that little red star in New York City at Columbia is where, you know, our headquarters is. And you can see the 9 states we have from the top right, which is the furthest right north point, northeastern point in the US of Maine, and through New Hampshire and Vermont and Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. And we provide public-private partnership collaboration, multi-sector, to be able to handle some of the challenges we have regarding big data and tackle and take advantage of the opportunities. So when the hubs were created, the idea is that it's a hub like in a wheel. So the hub is in the middle. We have these spokes, like the spokes in a bicycle. And so the 5 spoke areas that are focused in the Northeast are health, big data and education, cities and regions, discovery science, and energy. One of the things I'd like to mention in discovery science is that one of the things we've been noticing is the biomedical and chemical and biology and environmental disciplines haven't had the opportunity to really take advantage of information technology at the same depth for big data that disciplines like aerospace engineering or high energy physics has. So there are a number of projects that we're growing in the Northeast, at least, and I think we're going to see it across the country as well, that are in these areas of chemistry and biology and exposome databases and healthcare and connecting that with smart cities. So I think you're going to see that as a theme. And then we have these rings that go around that cover all of the spokes. Data literacy, meaning that we're teaching people how to leverage data, how to leverage it correctly. The ethics associated with that, I think of it as like a Hippocratic oath for using data, like the way doctors and physicians have the Hippocratic oath that they're supposed to abide by to say that they do no harm. That's very important in the leverage of data. The sharing of data, how it enable data sharing with security and privacy, which is a challenge sometimes, as we know. And so we work on all of these areas together. And this is the Northeast Hub spokes and rings. Uh-oh, I'm frozen, so when it moves, it might move 3 times. Okay, I'll talk real quick. So we have our spoke projects and our planning projects, which include data sharing projects, chemistry projects, data science, as I mentioned, cybersecurity, and these spoke projects and planning projects have been in place since 2016 and 2018. So they're pretty much, you know, they have their partners and they're moving forward. We also have innovator internships where we actually have placed grad students as interns, data science interns in industry and not-for-profits where the company can't necessarily afford or hire a data science intern, so that we can start injecting data scientists into these organizations at the same time allowing these students to grow in that space. We're working on this big data map, and Meredith may speak about this as well, and there's some forward-looking project work that we proposed in the next version of the Northeast Big Data and Innovation Hub proposal to the NSF that I'll talk about. And we've been working quite a bit on cybersecurity risk from the perspective of sharing data across institutions to reduce risk, to increase awareness of the risks, as well as looking at the integrity of the science. Because when somebody hacks your system, they can steal your data or they can just change it. And just changing it is not just when we're talking about science, as we know, because they can really mess up things that have been going on for many, many years and change data that's very critical. So these are the projects that we've been working on so far. And let's see if this works. The new and in the works projects include this big data map and an assets platform we're calling Crux. And that project is going to allow us to create a resource where data can be deposited. We can identify patterns and anomalies regarding data and the processing of the data, and hopefully be able to make it easier for people to be able to leverage data for good. We know there are a lot of different types of challenges. There are societal, cultural, technical, political challenges, but if we can start pulling all the big data together, we can hopefully find some process improvements, data sharing process improvements, as well as ways to leverage the data going into the future. We have an initial prototype started on this, so I think this could be very interesting. And after we hear back from the National Science Foundation regarding which projects are being funded in the next month or two, I think this might be an interesting area for us to discuss. On cybersecurity risk, there's a lot of opportunity to work together there. People can hack from anywhere, as we know, and there are a lot of nation states that do that across the planet. And so that might be an interesting area that also can connect to the work I do, as Daniella mentioned, for the NSF Cybersecurity Center of Excellence. We also do matchmaking events, kind of like what Mark was talking about, in bringing NSF-funded cybersecurity researchers together with practitioners, focusing on areas like leverage of artificial intelligence and machine learning for cybersecurity, with the velocity and variety and volume of data that needs to be assessed and managed and reacted to and anticipated in cybersecurity. That's one of our focus areas, as well as a number of others. In data literacy and acumen, the opportunity is to teach a lot of different people about data literacy, from children in schools to adults in many places to management and senior executives. You know, sometimes I'll read something about a senior executive, a CEO mandating, you know, what has to be done regarding, you know, data or the cloud in a company, and they may not really know what they're asking their team to do. I've also been very involved in a number of higher education university boards where I work with some of the students, And I don't know if any of you have seen this, but and these are, you know, college students, seniors, and I find that they're told they have to use the data. They'll do the analysis of the data, and then they say, therefore, this is the answer. And I say, how did you get that from the data? You know, so what I'm concerned about is that they're not gleaning the correct information and insights from the data. And we really have to teach them how to do that. And so that needs to be done across the board. And then to teach responsible data science, you know, the ethics of data science, whether it's the privacy of the data under a GDPR type of area, or if it's on a college campus, you know, what data can you use? We have rules in the United States as well that require us, if a student says, I opt out, you can't use my data, you can't use their data. You know, so how do we manage that? And then if that data is being used for research, how is it anonymized? Can it be triangulated to figure it out in the future? So there are a lot of challenges in that. That might be an interesting area for us to have a follow-on discussion about, because we all have to deal with it. And actually, all of these might be new and in the works areas that we'd want to consider in the future for further collaboration. So this is actually our proposed activities for phase 2 of the Northeast Big Data Innovation Hub that we're waiting to hear back from NSF if it's going to be funded or not. We'll know in the next couple of months, we believe. So you can see we have programmatic activities, the beige line down the middle, socio-technical services and education and workforce training areas. And then the two big buckets, the top being community-wide activities and then project-specific activities. So just like a lot of organizations, you know, we have a Northeast Hub Summit every year. There's an all hubs, all hands event where everybody can participate across the hub, so we work as a team. We're looking forward to a seed fund that hopefully will be part of the new NSF grants, where we can actually fund certain projects and institutions and, you know, initiatives and perhaps startups, which would be very cool. A pilot fund where we can enable some of the beginnings of that, and then our ongoing communications and coordination. Under the project-specific activities, there are a number that could be very interesting for us to talk about in collaboration. The first one you see is a funny way of spelling empowered, but that's because PAWR is a project that is well funded, that's been partially funded by NSF, US Ignite, which is a nonprofit we work with, and some others. And POWER stands for Platforms for Advanced Wireless Research. So the opportunity here in this empowered exposome data exchange pilot is to leverage healthcare data as well as sensor-based environmental data from like a smart city environment to be able to do predictive analytics and actually take action to improve the health and well-being and the processes within a community, which is really very exciting. It will enable experimental exploration of new wireless devices, networks, systems, solutions, and security. What they're hoping to do is reduce barriers to data access and interoperability from electronic health records to real-time environmental data. We have a test bed in New York City that would be in the Northeast Hub area. We have a test bed in Salt Lake City, Utah, which would be in the west, which would be in Meredith's area. And it can include health, traffic, and environmental data integration, which is very powerful. Just after that one, you'll see Smart Cities Data Exchange, SCDE, and that is working with US Ignite again and ADIS, which stands for the Alliance for Telecommunications Industry. And what we're looking to do there is to create specifications and a data sharing reference framework that would allow for data sharing within a city and potentially across cities so that we can learn from each other and learn how to improve our processes, our environment, and leverage the data that's going to be coming from wireless devices, whether those are on humans, on bicycles, in cars, on trains, on bridges, on lights, from cameras. There's a lot of opportunity for Smart Cities Data Exchange. And if we're successful, it could actually become a phased national deployment plan, which would be very exciting. The Seamless Licensing Agreements collaboration called SLAC here, which is not the Stanford Linear Accelerator, that's another SLAC, totally different. So the Seamless Licensing Agreements collaboration is a follow-on from some of the data sharing spoke work that's been done since 2016. And it's to enable public-private data sharing and addressing socio-technological challenges. As we know, the sharing of data isn't always a technical issue. It's also usually a cultural, institutional, and societal issue. Do we want to share the data? Do we want to let them see it but not really know what's going on with the data? There are also some research techniques you may have heard of, such as secure multi-party computation, that we might be able to look at leveraging in an area like this. That's where you can actually have algorithms that go across multiple databases from different organizations, extract the data to answer a certain question and not expose any of the data, which is really cool. So we're looking at how we can do not just agreements, but also the technical side of it. Responsible data science in government would make sure that we have legally sound and ethically compliant use of data. Once again, like the Hippocratic Oath for doctors, do no harm. We hope to address the socio-technical issues regarding responsible data-driven governance, data sharing, auditing, and enabling sensitive data to be made more available as appropriate. Building capacity with the carpentries might be an interesting collaboration opportunity. Some of you might work with the carpentries. They actually teach foundational coding and data science to researchers worldwide. They have some events, many events coming up in the US, but also just looking at their website yesterday and today, they have websites coming up in Belgium, Manchester, and Queensland. So that might be an interesting opportunity as we look at how we can build capacity for data scientists around the world, leveraging and working with the carpentries. Data science for all would allow us to increase data literacy and awareness across many different communities, from middle school, children in grade school, through college and into the business world and the communities. Management training would be for senior management so that they understand the opportunity to leverage data and the challenges and issues, privacy, security, and some of the others we've discussed. The Collaborative Resource and Understanding Exchange, CRUX, relates to the big data map that we talked about briefly. So we would be able to map and automate big data scientific workflows, which would be very cool, and look at the patterns and anomalies across the data. Learning and career development would allow us to look at, this is very interesting, to connecting student outcomes in MOOCs. I don't know what we call them in your country, but here we call them MOOCs, for massively online open courses that are being taken by children in grade schools all the way through retired adults. And it will be interesting to look at student outcomes, for students in school related to the MOOCs, to the career impact from middle school and above, which would be very interesting. And then outreach on educational data mining, once again, along with data literacy and awareness side, increasing the cybersecurity risk initiative so that we can make things safer and improve integrity and increase and optimize integrity, I should say, for data science. And then computational steering, being able to provide computational resources as required to help people with their big data initiatives. So these are the things that we are hoping and planning to do in phase 2 of the Northeast Big Data Innovation Hub, and once we find out from the National Science Foundation in the next month or two. So we don't do this alone. As we started saying at the beginning, this is about public-private partnerships and about creating an ecosystem. And we have many partners, actually many in the US, but also around the world. This page shows a number of large institutions and industry such as IBM, Oracle, Microsoft, GE, United Technologies, Aon, Amazon. When it comes to publications and data sharing, companies like Elsevier and McGraw-Hill and Thomson Reuters are very important in that space. So it's very valuable to enable them to participate with us. We actually had Oracle participated in one of our initial data sharing meetings a couple of years ago in I believe it was in 2016. And then some of the think tank areas like Meeting of the Minds. You'll see right in the middle for the center of attention is BDV, the Big Data Value Association in Europe. And we actually had a meeting with them a couple of years ago in Versailles that was very valuable to increase the collaboration across between Europe and the US. And then we also have had initial discussions with FPIA, which is also in Europe. So we're hoping that as we further some of these areas, we'll be able to increase some of this work. FPIA is the European Pharmacological Industry Association. So that's an interesting opportunity. And then you can see some of the other, the bottom right is a healthcare organization, Blue Cross Blue Shield in the US. We also, oopsie, I went too far. We also do work with a lot of higher ed institutions. You can see a number of them here, Pittsburgh, Harvard, Rensselaer Polytechnic called RPI, Worcester, many institutions, NYU, New York University, Mercy College in New York. And as we mentioned, we work with our regional academic institutions. So there are others that, Meredith would be talking about and Renata as well. But we all collaborate together, and also researchers tend to go from institution to institution. We also work with other organizations, the Census Bureau, New York State Development. As we mentioned, we work with state, global, local, CSC, NASA. I used to work for NASA many years ago. The Air Force Research Laboratory, the Department of Homeland Security, which is very important for cybersecurity, and the Department of Transportation. Meredith will probably be talking about one of her transportation projects that we all collaborate on across the country together as well. And Brookhaven National Lab, who works a lot with CERN as a Department of Energy national lab. And then Crosssector Outreach with some of these other areas, including supercomputer centers, the New York Hall of Science, hospitals, and this Odyssey database, which is interesting. It's an observational health data sciences and informatics database. And they are going to be a very important part as we move forward in the healthcare spoke. So what I wanted to share is that there's technology we're talking about, but it's not just about technology. It's really about collaborating to do good with data. And we've been doing this regionally in the hubs, across the country, between all the hubs, with industry and government, academia, and not-for-profits. And I think there's even more opportunity to work with our colleagues in Europe. So we're very excited to have this initial discussion about this, and we're really looking forward to the opportunities. So I think that's my getaway chart, as they say. Trying to go to my last chart here. I think it's goodbye. I don't know if this might be the last one now, Daniela. So I think
yes.
I'm done.
Yes, it's your last chart, Florence. So thank you very much for your presentation. This was very great. So I will just encourage the attendees, if they have any questions, to type it down in the question section, and Florence can address all your questions in the end. If this is okay, Florence, sure, of course.
That was wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now we will have to do a little change in the agenda because Renata has not logged in yet. So if you don't mind, Meredith, we will go with your presentation next. Is this okay?
Sure, no problem. Can you still hear me okay?
Yes, perfect. So there you go. Here's your presentation. So I will put you, there you go. As you are not able to change the slides, just let me know when you need to change it. I will do it by myself. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Daniela, and good morning or good evening to everyone who joined. We're excited to connect with you. Apologies, I can't change the slides myself, but I'm on mobile and they only give me the options to mute myself or report a problem, and that's neither of those. So my name is Meredith. I am the Executive Director of the West Big Data Innovation Hub. As you can see in this slide, our hub covers the western region of the United States, so 13 states, including Alaska and Hawaii. If you could go to the next slide, which will look familiar, Daniela, that would be great. Perfect. As Florence mentioned, all of our 4 hubs have this shared mission to build and strengthen partnerships across all sectors, really, industry, academia, nonprofits, and government. And we're particularly focused on the societal impact and scientific challenges, which as I go through the examples in my slides, you'll get a sense of what this translates to in sort of boots on the ground, real projects. We particularly care about spurring economic development in our regions and a bigger ecosystem, and really to accelerate innovation, however you may interpret that word, across all of our networks. If you could go to the next slide briefly, since it also is familiar. Great. Thanks so much. And so if we focus in on the West Hub, if you go to the next slide 4, you'll see that in terms of areas that were particularly compelling for our first community projects, we identified areas such as metro data science, which I'm sure resonates with our colleagues in the EU. Particularly, this is an area where we felt there was already substantial emphasis and investment when we were founded, 3.5 years ago, in industry, in academia, in government, and in nonprofits, looking at smart and connected communities, transportation, housing, data spanning police data initiatives to economic development. You'll also probably note that NSF has a substantial investment in smart and connected communities that we see a lot of synergies with. And René and I were just in Denver for the Smart Cities Connect meeting, and I know there were quite a few interesting areas for collaboration building off of that. A second priority area for us has been health and medicine. This is near and dear to my heart, pun intended. As a former PhD and postdoc working in this space, it's clear that better data, real-time capabilities, and improvements in diagnostics, treatment, everything from genomics to looking at environment and exposome. These are really compelling areas where collaboration across sectors can have a real impact in human life. A third area that we've been focusing quite a bit on, as Florence, I think, mentioned, that there may be fires and drought. There definitely are fires and drought in the Western area, and this is a topic that we've had substantial progress in bringing the community together around water. I'll mention this in a few slides later. Also in energy, agriculture, a lot of great opportunities with our colleagues in the Midwest there. Disaster response and recovery, as well as sustainability. Those all fall under the umbrella of natural resources and hazards. And then as we move from those specific application areas to some of our more cross-cutting efforts, you'll see that fourth quadrant mentions a priority on data-enabled scientific discovery and learning. And we envision this to encompass everything from supporting open science and reproducibility to data science education and workforce development. And we've seen this to be a really great opportunity to bring together different stakeholders who might not otherwise collaborate and work towards some common materials, open access resources, and lines of inquiry that are really critical for our community to help support. At the bottom here on this slide/chart, I have to smile that the emails discussing these called them charts. maybe one of these days it'll be transparencies back again. So this cross-cutting efforts section highlights just a few of the areas where we've seen substantial community interest and engagement, and we work to build connections. One is the Cloud Computing Task Force, that there should be some interesting announcements coming soon. We can't say yet from NSF, but there's a lot of interest in better utilization of the cloud in our cross-sector endeavors. Another area, or actually 4 interwoven areas, would be public policy, ethics or responsible data science, as Florence mentioned, privacy, and security. A third cross-cutting effort that spans all of the hubs is work towards more effective data sharing and infrastructure. And then finally, in the bottom right, you'll see a couple of initiatives that I will discuss in a little bit more detail. One is data storytelling, which dovetails nicely to some of the data literacy elements that the hubs have been supporting. And the last bullet here is, you may call them data paloozas or data hackathons, community challenges, but essentially all of these different creative ways to build collaborations and leverage the community interest, crowdsourcing, citizen science, and so forth, that allow us to call ourselves an innovation hub. And I promise this is my most dense slide. So as we go to the next one, Daniella, thank you. A few examples, because I think having a deeper dive into just a couple of these rather than trying to boil the ocean will be the most effective in illustrating the unique nature of the hubs. So on this next slide, you'll see what Florence had hinted at. Daniella, if you could switch the slide, that would be great. Thank you. One of the first initiatives that we worked on across all hubs was focused on safety, particularly the National Transportation Data Challenge. Started with conversations early on from the hubs across NSF and the Department of Transportation. You may be familiar with the statistic that traffic deaths across our nation increased 14% year by year in the last couple of years. And back when we started this, the statistic that a lot of people didn't realize was that recently, that year in 2016, there were nearly 6,000 pedestrians who died, and this was the highest number in more than 2 decades. So we wanted this endeavor to be well designed in that it wasn't something that we would put a bunch of civic hackers in a room together and then after a weekend anticipate that something earth-shattering would have happened. We felt that we really needed to build a series of community problem-solving sessions, discussions and roundtables, separate hackathons that were all connected through this theme, and different technology demonstration opportunities, both in person and online. And as we went across the nation to we ended up with more than 10 different cities engaged and numerous opportunities online. We kept adding logos to this effort, and for posterity and for the next phase, which we will be announcing soon, you can check out the website bigdatahubs.io. And that includes a number of different resources that still exist and ways to connect on the community mailing list. Full disclosure, we are working on the launch of bigdatahubs.org for all of the hubs. So this may shift and point to our next phase and online presence. But we felt that as we were pulling together the Transportation Data Challenge, having a one-stop shop for some of these industry commitments, community engagement opportunities, and projects was a critical first step. Perfect. Thanks for going to that next slide. So if you go specifically to the bit.ly that's on the side, bit.ly/NTDC docs, you can see all of the materials that were presented at our final summit, which include some commitments for open data and tool sharing that goes through to next year. As a result of this challenge, we had collaborations with Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and more to really highlight some of the open data opportunities in this space. It was also a useful governance model exploration for all of the hubs and building up this network of experts and data enthusiasts. Just one example of a partnership was with the Data Science for Social Good effort and the LRNG network, which encompassed 700 different organizations that reached 35,000 low-income youth every year, as well as a collaboration you'll see pictured here with a Pi Data meetup that then went out to a network spanning 33 different countries. And you might recognize Florence, Renata, and myself, plus Katie from the Northeast Hub and one of our datascience.com colleagues in that picture up in the upper right. We switch gears to a second example, although I'm sure there are lots of transportation enthusiasts in the crowd. This next one, Danielle, if you could switch the slide, encompassed many different disciplines and sectors and stakeholders. This was one of our first events, and it has stood the test of time over the last couple of years in really focusing on the art and science of storytelling, particularly with the workforce training component. So what we did, now it's been 2.5, 3 years ago, was to pull together a number of luminaries from the Los Angeles Times, the New York Times, schools of journalism, groups like polygraph.cool that have been known for pulling together interesting interactive data visualizations. And we ran a workshop with a hands-on component on how to develop compelling data-driven narratives to spark community engagement, fully realizing that sparking community engagement could mean pitching your idea as a startup, or it could mean getting the word out to get data collectors and different advocates in the community to engage with your narrative. This first workshop, we thought it would be about 30 people in a room in LA. Mark, I wish we had been connected at that time. It would have been amazing for you to join. We ended up having over 700 participants at that first workshop in person and online. A good 60% was from industry, which was interesting for us, given that traditionally a lot of NSF workshops would feature more academics, but this was a really diverse crowd. And we had 15 different countries tuning in remotely to this session. We continued this effort with a second workshop in partnership with the South Hub and AAAS, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, that publishes Science Magazine. Our second workshop also included folks from the Washington Post. And the good news is that all of these materials are available. Even the recordings of some of our speakers are on our YouTube channel, and we also have a hashtag, and this has become a series. So in the next year or so, you can anticipate a third data science storytelling effort. Great. If we could go to the next slide. And so I think a third element, and I'll try to go through this one a little bit quicker. Is Renata on the line for the next one, or just checking?
Renata's here. Hello, Renata.
Oh, perfect. Okay, good. Wondering how long I should fill the time for, because any one of these efforts could be a much longer conversation. But I will endeavor to mention the global movement for women in data science in just a few slides. So one of the things that, as you see on this map, strongly connects our communities across the Atlantic and globally is an effort that started at my alma mater, Stanford University, a few years ago. And the West Hub was really excited to help launch the first ever Datathon, this hands-on component, to the Women in Data Science conference. And now we've hosted 2, and we're looking forward to 2020. This is run on the Kaggle machine learning platform, and the data has spanned everything from financial inclusion data from the Gates Foundation to just this last year, we worked on annotated satellite images from Planet and Figure 8 to look at deforestation prediction. So I'm happy to speak offline with anybody else who is interested in this training and mentorship opportunity. There's a number of webinars, tutorials, and articles that are available online at widsconference.org that you can peruse and get a sense of how exciting it was to have more than 200 teams each year and more than 25 countries each year. And this work is presented to what I think is the largest data science conference on the planet now, over 100,000 participants globally, with many cities and countries joining the fray. If you go to the next slide, that's just a snippet of some of the diversity that we saw since this webinar has our colleagues from the EU. I'll just point out that there was definitely EU presence in our first and second place teams, and Sweden makes a appearance in the third place team as well. And these are groups that probably would not have met each other if not for this opportunity. I think that's a theme that you see throughout all of the hub activities, that we're trying to build and strengthen these connections where they might not otherwise happen. If we go to the next slide, building on this theme of education and workforce training, one of the things that has connected all of the hubs were the #1 referrer for this data science pedagogy and practice workshop that we hosted here at UC Berkeley. We're excited in just a month to have a second workshop focused on data science education, and many of the resources and points of discussion are open to the community here, and we're trying to pull together different resources that allow all of these constituents, people who are designing data science curricula in all of these different institutions, from community colleges, 2-year colleges, to R1 universities and everything in between, so that we can be inclusive by discipline, sector, and more. I don't know how many of you have been to UC Berkeley campus recently, but it's really quite amazing that each year there are about 4,000 undergrads, many of them in the Foundations of Data Science course that has about 1,500 people sign up every semester, and others I've had the pleasure to mentor personally for research projects related to the hub. And this is really amazing how much interest across so many different disciplines has come out for data science. So stay tuned for additional resources from that workshop on data science education, and hopefully Renata will discuss some of the Keeping Data Science broad efforts that we think are so synergistic and critical for the hub. So just a couple more slides. I see there's a poll for the webinar. Interesting.
Yes, so I'm sorry to interrupt your presentation, Meredith. So we are launching a poll now for the webinar in order for people to say if they are more interested in the research or the market side of the presentations. So currently, research side is winning.
Super interesting.
Okay, so you can continue with the presentation. We will just collect the results while you present it.
Okay, sure. I love live polls. We did that for our Women in Data Science webinar, and it was really great to see the diversity of backgrounds and interests globally. So I don't know if people will be able to see the next slide, but if you can go to just briefly, I wanted to give a shout out like Florence did for data carpentry. We felt that training the trainer is a great model to reach across our diverse community and to connect with the thousands of volunteer instructors that are emerging in this global landscape. So we were excited to work with, this is, oh, the one before that. Great. We were excited to work with Data Carpentry to host the first ever engagement with tribal communities, and we're continuing on with that in our second phase. If you go to the next slide, since Florence already mentioned this, I will just put this one slide up for some links in terms of responsible data science, data ethics, and so forth. There's a link to an article that came out of some of the hub-led discussions with the Bloomberg Data for Good exchange that we continue to support. We've also hosted in the Midwest, the West, and the Northeast so far 3 workshops sponsored by the National Science Foundation on translational data science and some of these challenges and opportunities. And data ethics and responsible data science is woven throughout all of these discussions. If you go to the next slide. One example, and I think Daniella and Mark can share these slides so that everyone has them, so I won't go into too much detail, but one example that we've done recently and are going to be launching for phase 2 in this summer, it really pulls together both the priority application areas as well as these cross-cutting themes from the hub. This is the California Safe Drinking Water Data Challenge, and this summer it's the California Water Data Challenge, and we're getting ready hopefully for a 2020, you're hearing it first, Water and Fire Data Challenge to really bring the community together with this series of different engagement opportunities and many projects being able to be supported through this community effort. If you go to the next slide, we started with just a handful of partners, and by the end of our summer sprint last summer, we had many recognizable groups, fantastic collaborators that span government, industry, nonprofits, and academic institutions involved. And this next slide shows just one snippet from the Global Climate Action Summit that was held in San Francisco. Danielle, if you could just show the next slide briefly. This was part of our Water Pavilion event where we collected input from the community on this wall that you see in the lower right, and literally the next day we had a 2-day event at the Berkeley Institute for Data Science. If you go to the next slide, you'll see a fireside chat, or more appropriately, waterside chat with the former Deputy Director for Technology and Innovation at the White House, Tom Khalil, as well as our PI for the West Hub, who's the interim dean for the UC Berkeley Division of Data Sciences, David Culler. And that link in the lower right actually goes to the full recording of the waterside chat, so you can relive the 45 minutes. And I can tell you that after rewatching it last week, there are many nuggets of wisdom there that hopefully will be helpful to you in your work and view things from an interesting perspective. Whether you work in water or not, we have some great discussions about the nature of innovation and connection across different sectors. I won't go into detail for the next 2 slides, but briefly just showing them. These are just a couple of examples of different projects that were supported through this water data challenge, and we continue to work with the different groups to keep developing those prototypes. And this next slide here, that's just another example project, but we could go to the final slide so we can wrap up and transition. Perfect. So you'll note whether from the upper left to Florence to the upper right was a community engagement exercise that we had at South by Southwest, to Grace Hopper in the middle, to working with the Maker Faire network and doing a panel on drones and data science, to different days of civic hacking. We try to be creative in the ways that we provide on-ramps for different participants. It really isn't just writing proposals to get specific research elements funded and then putting up journal papers. This is much more creative in terms of building community connection. If we reflect back to when we started 3.5 years ago and envisioning what success would look like in building and strengthening partnerships, we had some humble beginnings and said, well, maybe we can meet 5 people throughout this first year of the hub that could become meaningful collaborators. And really what we've seen in practice is some of our best work is done by the connections and the unique collaborations that the hubs have been able to support. So we're really excited to continue discussions with the group on the line. And this last slide just has some of the information for keeping in touch. That first email goes to myself and our 2 deputy directors, but my personal email is also listed there at the bottom. And we're on all of the social media platforms, so hope to connect in any way that is most convenient for you.
So thank you very much, Meredith. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for enlightening us about the activities of the West Big Data Innovation Hub. I will now pass the floor to Renata. Renata, are you there? Can you listen to me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. So Renata, thank you very much for joining our webinar. I already gave you mouse and keyboard control for your presentation, but if you are not able to change the slides, please just let me know and I will do it by myself.
Okay.
And again, thank you very much for joining us today and for presenting us today the South Big Data Innovation Hub. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us, for having this discussion, and for all of the people who are attending today. So this talk is about the South Big Data Hub. You've heard about 2 other of our big data hubs for the US. So I'm going to talk primarily about some of the priority areas in the South, as well as some of the things that was touched on earlier by Meredith around education, workforce, and ways we can specifically engage. So I will try to change the slide. Let's see.
If you are not able to do it, you just need, there you go.
Okay, great. So you should already know all our goal primarily for the hubs. The region in orange is the South, so it's Delaware through Texas, which is 16 states. And we have a broad goal that is the same, about capacity, increasing capacity for data science workforce, innovation, and partnerships, as you heard, to advance science, the societal challenges, and spur economic development in our region. So the things you heard about, a lot of education and workforce, I'll touch on that. Fostering innovation, how we do it in the South, building partnerships, the data sharing and infrastructure building, as well as community and outreach. But specifically for the, so maybe it's not working. All right, so maybe it just takes a little second. So specifically in the South, we have a number of programs. we have two coordinating institutions that are Georgia Tech in Atlanta and UNC Chapel Hill, which is in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And we'll talk about our spokes projects and how we can get engaged with those particular projects, our priority areas. We run fellowships for engagement specifically with industry and government. So academics engaging more directly with industry and government around short-term fellowships, partnerships in the cloud, works, and then a number of outreach and community engagements. So workshops, working groups, newsletter, briefings to government, and direct outreach to other schools and industry. So the main priorities, we have different priority areas in the region, and for the South, one of the priority areas is, we have 5. So we have 5 priority areas and 3 areas of interest. All right, and so these are our priority areas. So one is education and workforce development around data science. And so I'm leading the executive director, but I'm also leading that effort around education and workforce for the South. We have data sharing and cyber infrastructure, how we promote that. And so our co-PIs are Jay Acott, who is in North Carolina, and she is the COO of a center, Rensi, that is built around cyber infrastructure, providing that. And so there's a working group in this area and active collaboration with all of the other hubs. Then the ones above the line are really cross-cutting across our different areas. The ones below the line are vertical areas that are also have co-PIs leading them for the South. So one is health analytics and health disparities. Specifically this year, we're taking focus on HIV, AIDS, and also mapping of health disparities across different service deserts, so where the services are provided, and doing large-scale mapping of epidemics. So Patrick Sullivan is at Emory University. He's leading our health disparities, and he is also the lead of a project which is called AIDSView. So it's aidsvu.org, and it has a mapping of the entire country, county by county, of all of the epidemics broken down by demographic, race, the geospatial tagging, where the service providers are, where policymakers can make decisions to put extra service based on the population and need. And they're expanding that to other infectious disease states. So already AIDSView is being expanded to hepatitis C. And we're looking for partners that are interested in doing work in this space and also building out additional components for AIDSView. And this project has already got funding on its own for 10 years for $100 million for the next 10 years. So they will be around for a while, and it will definitely continue to grow. So we're looking for a collaboration there. Also, smart cities and community. Madhav Marath, who is the division director at University of Virginia, and he's leading our smart cities and communities, but he also is interested in smart habitat, which means that they the focus area of this group is really on digital twins for cities. So looking at how to digitally represent a city and a community so that you can make decision making based on actual statistics and data, so you can simulate the city. So this is running for 3 US cities, so the city of Dallas-Fort Worth, and they're using it in 2 areas to predict flu outbreaks, epidemics, and how to connect emergency responders to those outbreaks, as well as transportation and how to better predict traffic flow for new road systems. So Dallas-Fort Worth and Portland, Oregon are currently being modeled, and there is collaboration here. He has run this project. It's been over 10 years, so that they have very detailed models, and others in this space looking in the EU or domestically and how we might partner around those. The last priority area is advanced materials and manufacturing. This priority area is being led by Sira Kaladinde, who is at Georgia Tech, and he's the director of the Materials Design and Development and Deployment Center. And this is really connected to the overall materials genome project and accelerating the time for materials to make it to market. And so in this sense, it's really data science and analytics focused, and how do you use computational power to connect material development at the nanostructure level and the microstructure level up to failure testing and market testing in a way that accelerates the introduction of new materials into the market. So again, these are our main priority areas and the projects that are being launched. I'll talk more about the education project and the infrastructure projects as well. And then we have 3 areas of interest. And these are areas where there's work being done, or there's interest from a particular group. So team science is another area that we're launching. We're starting off as an area of interest. And Steve Fiore, who's director of the Cognitive Science Lab, has been running workshops on how to best do these large collaborative projects around science. How do you create the teams you need, make sure that those teams are effective and highly highly motivated to continue and to get to the outcomes that they really need. Then social cybersecurity is around misinformation and how that affects human behavior. So around things like misleading news, or how that might affect elections or healthcare decisions. And so there's a conference that will be happening in that. There's a working group that meets monthly virtually over the phone that can be joined for social cybersecurity if you're in this area. And lastly, environment and hazard response. And this is primarily work that's being done out of our spokes, looking at 3D mapping of the Gulf Coast of the United States for better infrastructure planning and disaster response. So I'll go into, from there, more information about how we're structured, how to get involved in those areas, and some more details about the work and impacts that are happening now. So I wanted to touch on the first major thing that happens with the hub is these what I call visionary projects, which they're called by NSF spoke projects, which I'm sure you heard of from the other hubs. And these are projects that are awarded in our particular areas, but they have leads that aren't co-PI leads, but they can be contacted as well. If you're doing work in this area, you can reach out to us. So one project is happening in the health disparities area already is the large-scale medical informatics. These 4 spokes were awarded in round 1, which was in 2016, and they have been ongoing for 3 years. And this one is around connecting patients who have cardiovascular diseases, and how do you connect data from them in real time from things like Fitbit and in-house collections outside of the medical office, even things like pollution in the area, sensors, to better predict what their outcomes might be. And so this is very also community driven, because the participants themselves are coming from African American communities, Hispanic communities, and in order to also build trust in these communities, they are teaching high school students from the communities how to build the data applications and the apps, so that then they can participate in collecting the data for the study, and also communicating its outputs back to their grandmothers, mothers, fathers directly. So then there's a much bigger uptake because of the trust in that. And also this is built on a model from the, there's been a heart study that did the same model where they trained, who is also one of the co-PIs for this grant, who they've done for the last 12 years, trained students in the areas on how to do cardiac testing. And they have a longitudinal study in this area. But what they found as a secondary effect that they did not expect is that after 12 years, they look back at those students that were being trained, and 70% of them ended up becoming cardiologists or going to school to become cardiologists, which was not the original intention. The original intention was to build trust in the community, but it had a huge workforce and career implication on these students' lives. So we're hoping the same will happen for data science and analytics in this process. Smart grid is one that's really about improving the electricity grid for better prediction, so that it would be possible to better predict solar power as well as natural power and predict brownouts and blackouts at a better rate for the different utility companies. So there's a large number, around 50 collaborators for this one, which include a lot of utilities. There's also going to be a workshop that's happening in June. That will be the fourth in this series. So that's something we could also reach out to about. And the last one is using AI for research and simulation around environmental research. So this is a collaboration between the Smithsonian Institute, which has one of the largest encyclopedia of life about different taxonomy of species, and a AI researcher. So they've built a Vera, which is now up on the Smithsonian site and also on the South Hub, that is a virtual AI assistant that helps researchers trying to do environmental simulations. So you can ask natural language questions about the environment, such as how many fish would be affected if the temperature raised overall by 1 degree or 10 degrees. So these types of interfaces help with building models, and that interface is connected to the Encyclopedia of Life as the backend, so it can actually pull in data about what the species are, what those species are actually doing, and what factors connect to those different species. So what type of things do they eat, such and so forth, to help build a model that is actually more realistic. These are the new round of spokes. So they were just awarded last year. They're beginning. And this one is the one on environmental mapping, which is doing a high resolution 3D map of the Gulf Coast of the United States. And this one is in partnership with Google Earth to be able to do high enough resolution to actually look at where land development and make decisions city and county level about what types of flooding and other things could be affected by a hurricane or natural disasters, which we do get at a high clip in the Gulf Coast region. The second one is around education, biological education, and creating different resources for video teaching and helping build tools in this area. And the last one is about privacy, doing smart privacy for cities. So this is in collaboration with a nonprofit, Future of Privacy Forum, that has done a lot of research into what makes a secure systems for smart cities and how do you evaluate those. So briefly, I'm going to talk about the education piece, and this is around building a network, a data science education network, and a community of practice that's cross-disciplinary. So there's some opportunities here, and I think expanding the capacity of institutions to break into data science is one that is clearly top of mind, and also as a hub, or the hubs even as a collective, to act as a clearinghouse for data science education and repositories for different disciplines. So for this, part of work that I started when I was working with NSF was to catalog where data science programs live at the moment. And I have it graphed, let's see. I have it graphed as a heat map for the US, but actually, so this is the current one as of May of this year. It's 486 US data science programs. There's actually about 80 more that are around the world, so a lot in the EU as well. So I'll be coming out with a map for that as well. And some of the schools, so also if there's different repositories, I knew that Yuri, they're working with the Edison project through the EU, a lot of the schools that were doing data science at the time also are being incorporated into this list so that it can be more worldwide. But this is just showing you the US. And the number of schools, we have a lot of master's programs. And as you can see, those master's programs are predominantly attached to the business school, which shows the strong industry connection here. We have almost the order of magnitude less than bachelor's and doctoral programs. And so that number also is reflective of how much time it takes to put together these programs, where they're located. Most of them are not called data science. They are, in large part, as I said, joint with either business schools, computing, statistics, information, mathematics, management, health, engineering, informatics, and then data science. So it's not straightforward to find these programs. They're not all named the same, and they don't all cover the same gamut. So some of that is about the maturity of the field and where we sit right now and how we're training people around workforce. So the main goals of the workforce and education is to do these 5 things. One is to do institutional outreach, which I'll talk about some of the programs, about increasing the capacity for data science education, faculty and student development in order to build up the skills for this, resource development, so providing resources that can lower the barrier to entry to teaching some of this and also to gaining these skills. Looking and expanding the current workforce efforts, so directly trying to do fellowships with industry and government, as well as complement existing programs in this area, and international participation. So being able to connect with efforts that are going on in the EU, such as the Edison project. Also, we had a workshop that was US-Japan collaboration with the PI for the South Hub who ran that for NSF around data science. Also, there's a connection, the collaboration we're doing with the city of Singapore around smart cities and how to educate people in city government. So that's something that crosses as well. So the institutional outreach, briefly, this is one that Meredith alluded to, which is Keeping Data Science Broad. It's a series that I launched a year and a half ago, and it was cross with all of the participation from all of the regions of the hub. And this was really to build up 4-year liberal arts colleges, historically Black colleges and Hispanic colleges. Community colleges in our system are like sometimes technical colleges, but they're 2-year colleges, and how to explore the challenges and opportunities of putting data science in these particular types of institutions. So the pictures you see are us going through the wall of challenges and then also a wall of opportunities. And at the end of this workshop, the participants during the workshop actually produced one-pagers. So we produced 29 one-pagers at the workshop, and then 16 after the fact. We together produced this report, which is about 50 pages. It's available on the South Hub website in order to about not only what are the consensus on challenges and opportunities, but what are the concrete next steps to building that capacity. And this was input for a consensus study that was done for the national academies that brought in a lot of different stakeholders and information about this. And this is out on the National Academy's website. One of the things that was really asked for was ways for training. So this is a program, Data Up, which we accept schools, faculty teams from different schools. We run a workshop through data carpentry, which at that school, and then we do training for the faculty, and they commit in the last part to incorporating data science into their current courses or to run their own boot camps. So that will continue for the next 4 years. Developing resources. So this is through our partnership with Microsoft, helping give cloud credits to researchers specifically. I'm going to, we can also talk about this going forward, but this one is about expanding workforce. This was a program run out of UNC called Data Start, which bridges graduate students with data-focused startup companies to build that bridge into practical work, which a lot of students say that they lack because they don't have that real-world engagement. This program is also called PEPIG, which is the program to empower partnership with industry and government. So this is faculty through research scientists and graduate students. But all of these are faculty members who do short-term 12-week fellowships with an industry company. And it's an exchange, really, or government. And so in this case, these are the industry partners where the idea is to build relationships for research. You have to be able to see the data that is available in industry or government. And there's a chicken and egg there where you have to provide a practical use case before industry, legal will allow you to see the data, but you can't develop said use case without seeing it first. So this is a way to get around that, where the faculty become employees, temporary employees of the industry partners, so they can then work with the team, be embedded in the team, and also provide immediate benefit, but also the long-term benefit is 100% of the participants, the industry partner is continuing to work independently with the faculty member over time as they were able to develop a clear use case. They have students that come through every year, and it's a much longer, broader relationship. And this is the program this year. So I said it was industry and government, but the 2019 program is actually with Department of Homeland Security, which is a government agency here, around specifically bringing in faculty, research scientists from academia and graduate students to help eliminate human trafficking, which is one of the areas, and to improve disaster response, because our disaster response and FEMA is actually under the Department of Homeland Security here. So this is how the program, connects with industry partners, but also government partners. So this is something that rotates each year. So if there are industry partners that are interested from the EU in hosting or having faculty and students from the south of the US, then this is a program that you can also participate in. You take industry and government participants in the fall, and then the program is advertised in the spring to different institutions. So that's another way to get connected and actually bring people over specifically to do work. I think lastly, I'll talk about our working groups. These are groups that we support 2 monthly working groups right now. The Cross Hub Data Sharing and Cyber Infrastructure Working Group, which is open to anyone to join, and that particular working group has been going on for a while and has every month demos. So different infrastructure places do demos of their different platforms. How does it work? What is it used for? What do you do? And so just recently we went through the backlog of all of them and split out all of the demos so that now they're available separately on the South Hub YouTube channel. So you can see, and each one is about 20 minutes, but it's very informative because it's from the developer telling you about how to use these tools without having to read all of their documentation to figure out where you might fit. So these are 10, but there's another 25 that are on the website now, looking at open science frameworks, different big data for cybersecurity. So all of these here and many more are there, and it's South Big Data Hub, just typed into YouTube. And then the Social Cybersecurity Group is also a monthly working group, and this is around the misinformation, fake news, and how that affects decision making in social and human behavior in the long term. So lastly, I'll just summarize taking the next steps for EU-US collaborations. This was a workshop that was held in 2017 that was joint again with the hubs, but it was hosted through in Versailles in connection with the Big Data Value Association meeting. I don't know if Florence already talked about this, but there was, a lot of participation. Of course, it was in the EU, and there was some outcomes, specific projects that ended up going into proposals around health and connecting. One thing that we had talked about connecting was the spoke projects with the BDVA Lighthouse projects and EU data science researchers, and maybe having a follow-up on this workshop. Also to come in the next round for the hubs, we have the seed grants, and so these are to foster the data science community. Now it is to foster data science community in our region, but if there's a primary PI or a primary person in the region, there can be collaborators from anywhere in any region, and also international collaborators. These are small scale projects and really around community building. There'll be details coming out. We're gonna in 2020, the separate steering committee that fleshes out the different, but things like, meetings or, being able to cross connect are things that I could see being very helpful around bringing people to particular meetings, especially if it's bringing Southern U.S. people to specific meetings that are that bridge and build on their data science community and effects. So that's one. And this is the overview, the final two slides. So this one is about for education and workforce. I would say there's a U.S. initiative around companies and universities fostering that. So if there are equivalent things going on in the EU, I'd love to connect about that. Also for the programs to empower partnerships with industry and government. If you're industry participant or an agency that was interested in sponsoring people to come and be a part of that, again, reach out to me. That would be good. We start building that in the fall. Right now, we've just accepted people into the DHS program last week, so it just closed. But for 2020, that would be also things. For cyber infrastructure, please consider joining the working group. And those times for the group are Fridays, and they're also on our website, but you can also reach out. We'll give you the direct links. Digital twins and simulated cities. So if there's a particular city and decision making where they have a fully built out infrastructure and actually inputting real data from the city in a privacy preserving way, if that's something that you're working on, we can connect on that. Health disparities, working, as I said, with HIV/AIDS, epidemic mapping, treatment data in genomics is the next expansion they want to do on that. I would check out AIDS View, AIDS, as I said, vu.org for the visualization and mapping that's currently being done. And I said it's also being expanded to other infectious diseases. So hepatitis C is the next one, but if there's and the framework itself can be expanded as well. And advanced materials and manufacturing, there's an e-communities of individuals that are interested in this intersection of materials and manufacturing and data science. It's called the Materials Accelerator Network. So you can go here to this particular acceleratornetwork.org. You can reach, and if you're interested specifically in test beds and distributed data centers for hosting data, you can reach out to me directly and I'll put you in contact with Sarah Caladinde, who is working in this area and also in MAN. And lastly, the social cybersecurity. So the working group, please feel free to participate. And also there's an in-person conference that's happening July 9th through 12th that the South Hub is sponsoring a session for the social cybersecurity working group at the SBP BRIMS conference, which is a conference that is specifically for behavioral researchers as well as social researchers. So this is a session within a larger conference that's happening. So I know I'm over, and I am going to basically, let's see, it's the last slide, it's the next one. It's not working.
Renata, do you have one more slide, or is this...
Yeah, I have one more slide, but it's just a
Oh, there you go. Perfect.
Yeah, so this is the slide where if you want to be a part of our monthly newsletter, you'll get all our opportunities letter. You can subscribe at southbigdatahub.org, all of these things. And we have a blog that comes out with events. We also have a Google group where you can post your own events, which is a listserv. So you can also join that group and post EU events. You can check out our workshops on our YouTube channel, and we're also on Twitter and everything like that. So that's it. The last slide just has my contact information. So thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Renata. Actually, quite impressive. 3 very good presentations over the last hour and a half. So on behalf of ENRICH, I would like to thank all 3 of the presenters. And it's the information was quite detailed and very good. In fact, your last 3 slides answered 4 of the questions that I have at the moment, or had. But I wanted to open this up to those that are participating by webinar. If you have any questions, we'd appreciate if you would type them in chat. My colleague Daniella put a note there, so if you do, please type them. This is a long webinar, so we won't spend too much time here, and very much appreciate our presenters and staying online to be available for the whole webinar. So that's very nice of you. Appreciate your time. As people are thinking of questions, I have one question for you. The last 3 slides there, or 2 of the 3, were very excellent in showing European folks that are interested in big data and what's happening in the US on what's going on and where they can participate and become involved. And so we will have these slides in the webinar available for them to review after today. Question to you, actually to all 3 of you. I saw, I hear of NSF, I hear of Homeland Security, and just curious from a big picture perspective, how much is NSF and Homeland Security, how much are they driving the areas of interest that you pursue in big data? Since you are regional hubs, I assume most of your funding comes from the federal agencies. And so if one of you could just speak to that. And so my first question is really, how much are they influencing you, number 1? Number 2, are there other national agencies that are funding your efforts as well, that besides those 2 that we should be aware of? So I'd like to start with that question. That's open for either Florence, Renata, or Meredith to answer.
Renata, why don't you take the lead, since you were talking about DHS?
Sure. So I will say that NSF is funding all 4 hubs, but they are not driving to extent of our priority areas. One area that they do call out is education and around data science. But beyond that, all of the different hubs have done efforts to look at what is regionally a issue in their area, in their regions, and those drive the priority areas. So then we tell NSF in the sense that these are the areas that are really important to our region. For instance, environment, it makes sense because we get a lot of hurricanes, natural disasters in the south, and the west has droughts and fires, and you can see the California water challenge. So in that sense, they're not driving. DHS, NSF is much more involved. DHS is involved in several different capacities as a partner with the hub. They are funding the PEPI program for this year to bring in researchers to DHS to work on those areas. And they defined those particular areas for me as we worked out this partnership, but they're not driving our priority areas. They're engaging in our activities. So anybody else have another take on that? But that's how they're involved for us.
Thank you, Renata. Meredith, did you want to add anything to that?
Sure, absolutely. So when I was in DC for a couple of years, I recall the Data to Knowledge to Action event and the Big Data Initiative that really brought together a lot of the federal government agencies at the time to discuss some shared challenges and opportunities and really build some bridges. One of the things that came out of that discussion that involved many community members, not just federal government agencies, was that in today's day and age, whether you're looking at scientific challenges or societal facing challenges and opportunities, there really isn't just one organization, agency, or type of stakeholder that holds all of the data, knowledge, or opportunity to take action, meaningful action, when you're talking about things as broad as, smart cities and connected communities or natural resource management or education. And so it's really that spirit of collaboration, of bringing in multiple stakeholders, whether they be federal government agencies or nonprofits or small startups and large companies, that makes the hub special, and that we serve this neutral convening role where we can try to balance this conversation and really think about who's not at the table. So I would say even though NSF launched the hubs with the initial seed funding, and they continue to be a critical partner in our development for phase 2. I think, Florence, we can say that we're recommended for funding, or that we have this horizon of 4 years. Everyone sees the public solicitation. That I know it's this transition period from phase 1 to phase 2, but we have throughout that process, whether it's with local government groups, industry partners, or nonprofits, continued to increase our diversity of funding sources so that it reflects the community input and engagement in terms of what's driving our mission-focused work.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much.
Just make 1 or 2 more comments. And, Meredith talked about Department of Transportation working with them, right, on the Transportation Data Challenge. Department of Homeland Security tends to be a touch point when we're doing cybersecurity, as you could imagine, risk and privacy. And then one of the things that I'm hoping to get more and more going is the integration a little bit more between the National Science Foundation and the National Cancer Institute and National Institutes of Health, as we do more around healthcare analytics, and like the Odyssey Consortium, which is worldwide already, observational health data sciences and informatics. So we're trying to bring a confluence together so we can apply data science skills to the scientific, chemical, chemistry, biomedical, and environmental and data, smart cities challenges. So you're going to see hopefully more of that collaboration going on.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. We have a few questions here, so I'll get right into them, and we won't go too much longer, maybe another 5-10 minutes. One question we have here is, what is the best way to interact with the hubs and with the network as a research organization or NGO? So is there a quick response to that?
Well, at this point, we are we're 4 separate hubs. So I think what you would do is reach out to each of us if you are interested in the work that we're doing, and we collaborate, very extensively, so we can connect with each other. So I would say if there's a specific area you want to learn more about, ask, and we'll connect with each other. Renata or Meredith, do you have a better answer to that?
No, I like it. That's perfect.
Yeah, listservs and social media. We have the shared BD Hubs hashtag, and all of the contact websites, I think, are on the slides. Excellent. To sign up for the email list.
Okay, and a couple questions there on the presentations, if they'll be available. Yes, they will be available, so you can contact us at ENRICH, Daniella or myself, and you'll see them on the ENRICH website. One last question that I see here. Based on past experience, own knowledge, what are, in your opinion, the key advantages in collaborating with European partners?
Well, I'll take that just as an initial answer. I think that there are several key advantages. One is there are a lot of challenges and opportunities that cross boundaries. When you're just talking about education and workforce, that's something that has to be tackled on both sides. Also, things like, how do you equitably deal with privacy in a smart cities context. I think a lot of the work that we do is synergistic with work that is happening, and there's a clear benefit in getting shared knowledge and best practices on both sides. So for me, that makes the most sense. And also, there's a benefit to seeing how the structure is different in the two places that came out in the workshop, where when working with some of the things that have to deal with government or it particularly, around some of the policies around privacy, there are clear differences in how do companies and institutions that have collaborators, academic institutions that have collaborators in different places around the world navigate that. And I think some of that can be done on both sides, navigating those different environments.
Well stated. Meredith, you have anything to add?
Sure, absolutely. I think one of the key advantages for the West Hub and really all of the hubs for any organizations, if I might be so bold to say that any group that you work for, the diversity is really a strength. And so we look to our EU partners for inspiration, for these creative sparks of looking at things through a different lens. Clearly, with GDPR and the impact of the policy landscape, there's a lot of interest globally in the EU. I remember with different industry partners in the smart cities space early on, we were really seeing a lot of interesting developments in the EU there from a partnership and collaboration perspective as well. But you never know what you would potentially collaborate on unless you keep the eyes open and try to strengthen the dialogue. So we really see that the fact that it's different across the Atlantic as a strength.
Totally agree. One thing I'll add to that is that humans are global citizens now, right? It used to be you were from a country and you kind of stayed there more often, but now we're all over the place, and the data can go anywhere too. And the cybersecurity risks are global. So I think the more we can collaborate, the stronger we'll be altogether to serve our countries, to serve the citizens, and to improve what we're doing around the planet.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. I think from what we've seen with the focus on big data as a webinar and the response we had of interest to this and the number of attendees we had on this specific webinar, which is the largest we've had to date, it's clearly an area that's of interest and concern to the Europeans and with regard to the U.S. So very, very fortunate to have the three of you support this and provide your views and very excellent presentations today. As we said, this will be available on the ENRICH website, and so I'm certain that we'll have a lot of interest from Europe in moving forward. And so very much appreciate your support. And if we do have any more questions after this, folks can reach out to Daniella or myself, and we will definitely reach out to both Florence, Renata, and Meredith on a response. So in that, I'd like to thank the three of you for your support, and we very much appreciate your time today.
It was our pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Take care.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Take care. Have a good week. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.